Here's what's coming up on the world today. Fighting continues between Israel and militants in the Gaza Strip despite international interventions. Parts of India hit by cyclone Tuakte, adding to concern over COVID-19 cases that have been surging in the country. Plus, South Africa begins second phase of its COVID-19 vaccine rollout. A warm welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers in Lagos. We continue monitoring the exchange of airstrikes between Israel and Palestinian militants in the Gaza Strip, and we understand Israel has conducted more than a dozen of them today alone. The pre-dawn raids on Gaza were some of the heaviest seen since the fighting began a week ago. Israel claims it's targeting facilities belonging to the Hamas, but main roads and power lines have also been damaged.
It is utterly appalling. This latest round of violence only perpetuates the cycles of death, destruction and despair, and pushes farther to the horizon any hopes of coexistence and peace. Fighting must stop. It must stop immediately. Rockets and mortars on one side, the aerial and artillery bombardments on the other must stop.
It is exactly a week since the fighting between Israel and Palestinian militant groups began, and the barrage of airstrikes today marks the start of the second week. Hamas-run Health Ministry says 200 people have now been killed in the Gaza Strip since the airstrikes, with at least 59 children and 35 women, while more than 1,300 people have been injured. The Israeli military says it has killed more than 130 militants in Gaza. The death toll on the side of the Israelis is only 10, including 2 children and 1 soldier. International intervention is yet to yield any results. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says the United States is working intensively to an end to the violence.
So we've been working intensively behind the scenes to try to bring an end to the conflict. President Biden has been in touch with Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Abbas. I spent my own flight on yesterday to Copenhagen on the phone with regional leaders, including from Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, as well as with my counterpart in France, discussing the urgent need and the violence. And we'll continue to do that later this afternoon.
Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian says China condemns the acts of violence against civilians and urged both sides to stop fighting. Germany says events in recent days showed why the European Union lists the Palestinian organization as a terrorist group. The death of Hussam Abu Habib, Islamic Jihad's armed commander for North Gaza, is likely to draw a fierce response from the militant group that is fighting alongside Hamas, the Islamist militant that governs the coastal enclave. Earlier today, Islamic Jihad said it had fired rockets at the Israeli coastal city of Ashdod, and Israeli police said 3 people had been slightly hurt. Israeli security and emergency services were seen working at the scene where a Gaza rocket hit a residential building in Ashdod. Meanwhile, Israelis living near the Gaza Strip are calling for peace as the deadly conflict continues. France and Egypt have become the latest nations to call for an end to the violence. French President Emmanuel Macron and his Egyptian counterpart Abdel Fattah al-Sisi say they share a deep worry about the ongoing escalation of violence and deplore the many civilian victims.
Well, it might appear Israel has the upper hand in the hostilities with militant groups in the Gaza Strip. But as my colleague Marachi Ubani found out in her conversation with lecturer at Birzeit University in Ramallah, Juman Kunis, the Palestinians have lost a lot more in the hostilities. However, Palestinians want their rights to be recognized.
You know, Juman, it is unfortunate that Hamas militants are actually living amongst the civilian population in Gaza, unfortunately. And that's why there are more casualties in that part of the world than on the Israeli side. Would you really blame Israel for actually targeting, the people it considers as its enemies?
If they consider Hamas as enemies, I don't think that they consider Hamas as enemies. They consider the whole Palestinian people as enemies. Unfortunately, people who are living peacefully in these buildings, which were destroyed yesterday and in the last 3 days, all of them are civilians. All of them are unarmed. I think that the Israeli army is very very developed, and they know well from where the missiles are coming. But they are destroying the building, and they know well that there are innocent and unarmed people there. Gaza Strip is very crowded, the most crowded geographic point in the world. So they have to know that well. And I think that they can avoid the civilians, but this is what didn't happen because they want to make pressure on Hamas. This is my point of view, and this is what Palestinian people think.
In other news, the Indian western state of Gujarat is bracing for landfall of Cyclone Tuakte, most likely the strongest to hit the region since 1998. While the storm has roared up India's western coast, with at least 9 people killed, thousands of people have been evacuated. Efforts are underway to rescue more than 400 people stranded off the coast in commercial barges.
People are being evacuated from low-lying areas along the western coast because of the powerful cyclone. Cyclone Tuakte, which informed in the Arabian Sea, has already brought lashing rain and winds that damaged houses and uprooted trees to parts of western and southern India. It's expected to cross Gujarat with wind gusts of up to 175 kilometers per hour. Nearly 150,000 people will be moved from villages and low-lying areas near the coast, and directions have been issued to complete the evacuation process. By Monday, strong waves crashed into Mumbai's gateway of India's monument as Cyclone Tuakte made landfall on the west coast. At least 12 people have been killed, according to the authorities, and the cyclone left a trail of destruction as it brushed past the coastal states. Officials are advising people to stay indoors as they anticipate flooded roads, damaged power lines and uprooted trees.
Well, South Africa has begun its second phase of COVID-19 vaccine rollout for those over the age of 60. The country's health minister, Dr. Zweli Mkhize, today paid a visit to one of the vaccine sites to oversee the rollout to ensure everything is on track. He was accompanied by the Premier of Gauteng. Mr. Mkhize outlined government's plans and targets of the number of people they would like to reach in this second phase. The minister also assured people that the vaccines being administered are safe after the Johnson & Johnson jabs were temporarily suspended due to reports of blood clots in patients who had taken the vaccine.
This phase 2 is supposed to give us 16.5 million people that must be vaccinated. We want to push for that as much as possible. So we do know that people have been waiting for long for these vaccines. We do know that people are still wanting to get the vaccines now, but we are pleading for patience, and we are really thanking South Africans for working with us until this process kicks in at the point at which we are. We know that we would have loved to have the vaccines as early as January or December last year. It was not possible, but now it is here. Let's make use of it. Let's also work together because what a number of people need to understand is that if we go into these phases, then there'll be no clogging of the system, there'll be no jumping of the queue. We'll clear people and deal with them as quickly as possible. Many people have been worried whether we will be able to reach the targets. I'm saying we're going for our targets. Whatever happens, we have to push. But we do know now that on the latest estimations, it's going to take us up until first part of 2022. Now that Johnson & Johnson was delayed, we then had to put up an emergency arrangement. But we're expecting that the Johnson & Johnson, those vaccines should be released. We're hoping sometime this week. I'm going to be having a meeting with Johnson & Johnson Global Office by Wednesday. So we will know after Wednesday exactly when they will release them. The vaccines are ready, they're manufactured, we know they're not contaminated, we know they're safe, we know they're available. They're just waiting for the global audit process to be concluded. And the audit is largely taking place in the United States of America, and therefore on Wednesday we'll get our final answer, and therefore we expect that they should be released after that. It's going to make it much quicker and much easier to vaccinate when we've got one jab, we've got no storage problems, and we can mostly deploy them to the rural settings as well as in the small town.
I can say that the injection is very good for me. Yes, it's no matter to have it. You can have it anytime you like.
I'm all right, no fear, no nothing, no stress.
Still ahead on the program. Microsoft says it investigated Bill Gates' involvement with an employee of the company almost 20 years ago. Welcome back to the program. As Britain reopens after its latest lockdown, Portugal is hoping to do the same as countries slowly get into summer tourist season. Portugal says it will allow holidaymakers from Britain to enter the country from today, prompting a sigh of relief from hotel owners already inundated with bookings. Britain added Portugal, whose economy heavily depends on tourism, particularly from the UK, to a green list of foreign destinations a week ago, allowing Britons to travel there without needing to self-isolate for COVID-19 when returning home. European Union's rules prohibit non-essential travel from outside the bloc, making Portugal's decision to allowing UK tourists an exception. Portugal, which has reported around 300 to 400 new COVID-19 cases a day over the past month and no new deaths as of Friday, May 14th, has lifted the majority of lockdown rules, but bars and clubs remain closed, restaurants must close by 10:30 p.m. and masks are mandatory in crowded spaces and indoors.
Fantastic. The feeling is unbelievable. We've got sun, we've got the people, the beaches, the bars. Can't wait.
Oh, really strict, and it's been so stressful this whole week. Like, if we can calm, if we can't calm. And yeah, it got announced Friday, and I'm here.
Yeah, I'm on the first flight from London to Lisbon. I stay in Caparica. Happy days.
Yes, I come here all the time. So I love the country, so I couldn't wait to be back. So great to have it come back into the green zone, as they say. So yeah, really happy.
Oh, it's been awful. The whole year has been an awful year. It's really been hard. Really been hard. Yeah. So we're going to sleep on the beach.
Come here to see friends, holiday, see our property we bought a year ago, before COVID. We can't wait.
Do you miss the sunshine as well?
Miss the sunshine, miss the Portuguese people as well.
Muita alegria, muita felicidade em ver a minha família de volta. Tem sido uns tempos muito exaustivos, muito cansativos, muito trabalho lá, tendo em conta que trabalho no parte da SNS ou NHS lá. Portanto, é muito bom voltar a casa agora.
Meanwhile, the World Health Organization says working long hours is killing hundreds of thousands of people a year in a worsening trend that may accelerate further due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In the first global study of the loss of life associated with longer working hours, the paper in Environment International showed that 745,000 people died from stroke and heart disease associated with long working hours in 2016. The joint study produced by the WHO and the International Labour Organization showed that the most of the victims, that 72%, were men and were middle-aged or older. Often the deaths occurred much later in life, sometimes decades later than the shifts worked. It also showed that people living in Southeast Asia and the Western Pacific region, the WHO defined region which includes China, Japan and Australia, were the most affected. Overall, it said that working 55 hours or more a week is associated with a 35% higher risk of stroke and a 17% higher risk of dying from a heart disease versus a 35 to 40-hour working week. While the study did not cover the period of the COVID-19 pandemic, the WHO officials say that the resultant surge in remote working and the economic slowdown may have increased the risks.
We have some evidence that shows that when countries go into national lockdown, the numbers of hours work increased by about 10%. This is from a study from the National Bureau of Economic Research in the United States across, I think, 15 countries in 2 regions. They've shown there is an increase in working hours, so this might well be operating through teleworking, but we don't know enough quite yet, but it looks like it. We also have coming about through the economic crisis and people working home, we have a digitization, right? A sort of massive increase in digitization of work. And digitization of work might actually make it harder to disconnect, right? Because everybody knows that we feel more exhausted. Dr. Lee, Professor Lee has highlighted that long working hours operate through stress. So if we work really long hours, we're more stressed and we're less likely to be as productive as we would be if we work healthy hours. So it's really a smart choice to not increase long working hours during an economic crisis and rebuild better by using sustainable limits of working hours as well.
A decade after being granted asylum in Sweden, 19-year-old Tusin Chiza is representing his adopted country at the Eurovision Song Contest in Rotterdam next week. Tusin, or Tus as he is known in Sweden, was born in the Democratic Republic of Congo. He fled to a refugee camp in Uganda aged 5 with his aunt, siblings and cousins and lived there for 3 years until moving to Sweden aged 8. He says it's a huge honor for him, and it's like a way of saying the biggest thank you to the Nordic country.
For Tuesday, Sweden's 2021 Eurovision Song Contest contender, it felt like entering a new world coming to the Nordic country at the age of 8 from a Ugandan refugee camp. 19-year-old Tuse, short for Tusin Chiza, will represent Sweden in the Eurovision Song Contest in the Netherlands with the song Voices, and he will take the stage on Tuesday, May 18th, in the first semi-final of the competition. Born in the Democratic Republic of Congo and separated from his parents at the age of 5 during an attempted escape from the civil war-torn African country, he spent 3 years in a refugee camp with an aunt before being granted asylum in Sweden.
The difference is huge from going from the refugee camp where you didn't know, you had no idea where your next meal would be, or if there were any food, to Sweden, which there's plenty of food, plenty of water. You don't have to worry about those kinds of things. It's really cold here. I'll let you down. Well, it's turning us around.
Having sung throughout his childhood in Africa, mainly in church choirs where he wished he was the minister so he could perform solos to the congregation, Tuse kept singing in Sweden, in choirs and eventually in talent contests such as Swedish Idol, which he won in 2019. He found out a few years ago that his biological parents were still alive, although his mother has since died.
I grew up, thinking my parents were gone and ultimately thinking that they were dead. So to actually find out that they were alive and well, and they got in touch with me for the first time again. It was huge. Just so much joy and just happiness, because there was something always missing in my heart, and it kind of, you know.
He said his father had been cheering him during the Swedish Eurovision qualifier contests, and he plans to travel to meet his father once the coronavirus pandemic restrictions are lifted. This year's Eurovision Song Contest, one of the world's biggest annual television events, will take place in Rotterdam from May 18 to 22, following the Netherlands' victory in 2019 with the song Arcade. The event will have a limited live audience after the 2020 edition was cancelled due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Bill and Melinda Gates have been in the spotlight lately because of the announcement of their divorce. Well, the spotlight remains on them as Microsoft conducted a probe into co-founder Bill Gates' involvement with an employee almost 20 years ago after it was told in 2019 that he had tried to start a romantic relationship with the person. Microsoft said in a statement it had received a concern in the latter half of 2019 that Gates had sought to initiate an intimate relationship with a company employee in the year 2000. The Wall Street Journal reported on Sunday that Microsoft's board had decided that Gates' involvement with a female employee was inappropriate and he needed to step down in 2020, citing people familiar with the matter. The Microsoft spokesman declined to comment on whether the board had decided Gates should go. That's the world today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Jockey Rogers.